Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for our webinar, Perception versus Reality, 3 Ways Internal Communications Nurtures the Success of Partnership Ecosystems. I'm Sarah Nichols, Engagement Manager here at Expert Marketing Advisors, and alongside me is Celeste Malia, AR/PR Expert at EMA. And thanks so much for joining us, Celeste. We're excited to hear your input.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Yeah, so I think we can probably kick off with going through kind of what's happening today with partnership and internal communication versus external communications.
Happy to dive in. You know, when I look at what's happening in partner enablement community today, oftentimes businesses are looking to drive growth. They're looking at how do they become partner of Amazon or Salesforce, and how do they define their partner ecosystem? They're always looking outward. And then they're always quick to raise the flag, hey, I've got a new partner. But the reality is that there's a big audience right inside of your own community of employees. You have executives, marketing teams, sales teams, products. And that employee community is really important to help evangelize a lot of the partnerships. So I'd love to talk today about how can you take advantage of using internal communications to enable the partner program.
Perfect. So I think it'd be good, we can go through kind of like the top 3 takeaways that you've seen for internal communications and how that's really enabled success in various organizations.
You got it. You know, I think the very first takeaway that I often see in companies, and this is probably the number one thing that companies do, is that they always think that they could just get employees to share anything on social media. But the reality is that in order to get employees to influence and talk about partnerships, you really need to get their personal buy-in. And then once they understand who the partner is, why did you partner with them? What is the partnership going to do for your customers? And what outcomes do you expect out of that partnership? Those are the kinds of insights that employees need to feel knowledgeable about. And once they have that information, they will probably feel more inclined to want to share that with their community. Have you seen some best practices around this, Sarah, where companies try to get employees to share things socially?
Well, one thing that a lot of companies will ask of us is, can you create these social media packs, essentially like giving kind of canned social media copy that they can pass around to folks and they can post on their individual social platforms. Do you feel like that's enough?
That's a really, really good question. I think it's a really good tool to give people, here's some nifty ways, something that it's very lightweight that you could just take to your audience or to your communities. But I think even before that, they need to understand the why and the what's happening. And that is often, communicated in a press release. And a press release is geared externally for reporters and customers and your competitors. And it misses the most important audience you've got, which is your employee base. So before you hand them over those social tweets, I think you really need to talk about the big why and help them become comfortable with the content.
Okay, and I think that leads really nicely into takeaway number 2 about incorporating it into their everyday life.
Absolutely. There's a life cycle to enablement, right? I mean, it's not just hit and run. Internal communications can be a really good partner strategically for business development, partner managers internally. So once you've defined a new partner or an existing partner, how do you tell that story? How do you integrate that into the everyday work that people in your businesses do? So we live today in multiple places. We live in our phones, we live in our computers, and even within our computers, there's Slack channels, there's email. There's so many ways for us to kind of reach our employees. And you need to find ways to get inside of those working points, in fact, and reach them. So whether it's a newsletter, an employee newsletter, or a quick Slack channel that's dedicated towards partner enablement or partner highlights. Or it can be a top-down approach. How about going to an executive or an executive meeting or a senior leadership meeting, talking about the partnerships there? So you need both in a top-down and a bottom-up strategy. And you need to find all the different components that people use to do their work today and communicate through those channels. And I won't say it's easy, because there's almost so many ways to communicate. So your internal communications expert is really your guide. They're your best guide to help you navigate what are those channels, what's the best way to do it, and when to do it.
Do you recommend having somebody like a partnership enablement champion? And if so, what could that look like?
I think you're onto something. I've actually come across some interesting business descriptions recently for some big companies, and their whole goal or their whole focus of that role is to work with employees internally. And if that person can find the advocates that you mentioned, Sarah, whether it's in the products team, the sales teams, marketing teams, all of those key pieces of the business that you need for enablement, and you find those advocates that can help tell your story and even navigate you to the right meetings, that's really the best way to keep the partnerships at the top of mind and to keep talking about them. Because once you tell them, we've got a new partner, now you've got another chapter to tell them. How are you working with those partners? What are you working on? What did you guys do together? And that is a story that you want to keep in the forefront of all employees.
That's perfect. I feel like if you don't have somebody championing it, it kind of falls off as an afterthought, unfortunately, at times.
Exactly. It's something I think I remember, or I go to the website and I see, oh yes, we're a partner of theirs, right? But a really good story is something that you're constantly telling employees. And that's really the role of the partner enablement today, along with internal comms.
Perfect. Moving into number 3, if you could kind of dive into use cases and customer stories, how you've seen this work.
I think one of the best ways to drive alignment internally in any type of enablement is to use cases and customer stories. And the internal communications expert can also point you to how to disseminate this information. How do we get these use cases being talked about? Where should they happen? In what format do they happen? I personally have been a part of an organization that had a company kickoff session where everyone was kind of broken into different groups. And in those groups, we played Shark Tank. And we thought about the product we had and how can it be different, how can it be used? And employees really are the best asset to come up with these use cases and identify use cases that help with existing partners, or they can also identify partners that you need to add to your ecosystem. And so they may even enlighten you on, hey, this is where a company direction should be going. And so by evangelizing those use cases, it helps, keep it at the forefront. So you're not competing so much with the priorities of products teams, because we all know they get inundated with other features they need to build. They've got, you're competing for your existing customer time. And of course, you've got partner use cases that could bring in potential revenue too. So it's a story that you need to keep at the forefront. And really, that is what you're trying to drive, is shared vision across the company by using these customer stories and use cases.
That's great. We always hear of customer success stories kind of external facing on the website, but we don't really think about them in the context of partner enablement. So it's a new way to think about kind of like putting that on display for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. 60 or 65% of strategic business partnerships fail. And they fail for a variety of reasons: communication, not aligned goals. But you've got an army within your own organization, and that's your employees. And if you can integrate customer stories at your company town hall, or even through like a simple email that gets every Friday of each month. You could talk about, here's some new customer, joint customer wins we've got. Showing the ROI of your partnerships is equally important to finding new use cases.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect. Well, I didn't go to the slide, but broad evangelization of use cases. Sorry
Yeah.
for over to that one. Well, thank you so much, Celeste. I think is really helpful. Partner enablement is such a huge component of a company's success. And I think sometimes it's kind of left to the wayside, or something we don't, prioritize all the time. Just to kind of go through the key takeaways here, really turning your employees into advocates, making partner enablement a piece of everyday work for folks. If that means assigning a champion, a partner enablement champion, to communicate with people on an ongoing basis, and then finding a way to develop and communicate those use cases and customer success stories to, keep everybody in the loop. Anything else to add to that, Celeste?
Nope, that's perfect. Your internal communications expert is really your guide to all of these three scenarios, and they could really help build out and shape a program that makes it very easy for any partner or business development manager to employ across an organization. So thanks for having me, Sarah. It was great to kind of touch on a subject that no one is really talking about, but a lot of people are struggling with.
And if anybody has any questions or wants to dive a little bit deeper into the topic, feel free to reach out at contact@expertmarketingadvisors.com, or directly even to Celeste at expertmarketingadvisors.com. But thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks.